Beneath the East Antarctic Plateau, where the ice achieves its greatest thickness and the surface temperature plummets to the lowest recorded on the planet, a silence reigns that is not merely an absence of sound but a physical presence. It is a quietude measured in geological time, accumulated over millions of years, layer by infinitesimal layer of compacted snow that has slowly, under its own immense weight, transformed into a contiguous shield of crystalline water 3, and in some places nearly 5, kilometers deep. This colossal lens of ice, so vast it depresses the Earth's crust, flows with the languid, inexorable pace of a glacier, yet its interior holds a stillness that preserves the ancient atmosphere in tiny, trapped bubbles and records the planet's climatic history with unparalleled fidelity. For decades, this ice was perceived as a barrier to understanding, a white shroud over a hidden continent. But with the advent of new observational technologies, it has become a medium of discovery, a transparent window into the deep past, revealing the ghost of a landscape buried and held in stasis. Through this medium, using waves of energy that penetrate where no light can reach, a map of the underlying continent has been meticulously assembled, charting the contours of mountains and valleys unseen by the sun for 15 million years. It was during one such survey, a systematic grid mapping of the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a range larger than the European Alps yet completely entombed, that the first indication of a profound anomaly emerged. The data, collected by ice-penetrating radar and corroborated by gravimetric sensors mapping subtle variations in the planet's gravitational field, presented an impossibility, a feature so geometrically precise and so vast in its scale that it defied every known natural formation process. Located deep within a subglacial trench, a valley carved by ancient rivers and now filled with the oldest ice on Earth, the feature registered as a perfect, three-dimensional rectangle, its corners forming flawless right angles, its surfaces planed to a degree of flatness that rivaled engineered constructs. Its dimensions were staggering, 12 kilometers in length, 8 kilometers in width, and extending downward for at least 2 kilometers, a monolithic presence whose density was significantly higher than the surrounding continental crust, suggesting a composition of materials not native to the local geology. This was not an erratic boulder, nor a peculiar igneous intrusion, nor any trick of geomorphology. It was a structure, an artifact of such colossal proportion that it implied an organizing principle, a deliberate arrangement of matter that shouted its artificiality through the silent data streams. Its existence posed a question that resonated back through the deepest corridors of time: what process, or what intelligence, could have assembled such a monument on a continent before it was claimed by the ice, and then left it to be buried under a frozen mantle, a silent testament to a history previously unimagined and entirely unknown. The discovery was a whisper from a forgotten world, amplified by the cold, impartial instruments of modern science into a declaration that the story of intelligence on Earth was far older, and far more mysterious, than had ever been conceived. The imperative to investigate this anomaly became a singular focus for a consortium of international scientific bodies, a mission that pushed the boundaries of engineering and human endurance. The target lay beneath 3,200 meters of solid, flowing ice, at pressures exceeding 300 atmospheres and temperatures that would flash freeze conventional lubricants and fracture standard metals. To reach it required a process of immense patience and technological sophistication, a careful and deliberate piercing of the ancient ice sheet without contaminating the pristine, stratified layers or compromising the potential discovery below. A specialized hot water drill, a system refined over years of polar research, was adapted for the task, its heating element designed to melt a borehole just wide enough for the passage of a bespoke exploratory probe. For months, the drill worked, its thermal lance sinking meter by meter, day by day, into the heart of the polar cap, creating a temporary liquid conduit through epochs of planetary history. The water used in the drilling process was sterilized to an unprecedented degree, filtered and irradiated to ensure that not a single microbe of the modern world would be introduced into the isolated environment below. As the drill approached its final depth, a tension settled over the surface camp, a palpable sense of anticipation that transcended mere scientific curiosity. The final few meters were breached with a sudden change in pressure readings, an instantaneous drop that indicated the drill head had broken through the ice and entered a void, a space that should not have existed. The borehole was then sealed at its upper end, and the sterilized water was pumped out, replaced by a column of inert gas to maintain the pressure differential. Into this carefully prepared shaft, the probe was lowered. It was a slender, autonomous cylinder of titanium and composite materials, packed with a suite of sensors designed to withstand the crushing pressures and abyssal cold. Its descent was a slow, deliberate journey downward through the narrow, dark passage, its fiber-optic tether spooling out behind it, a fragile link to the world of sun and air. The final moments of the descent were tracked with agonizing precision. Then, it emerged. The probe's forward-facing cameras, shielded by synthetic sapphire, activated, transmitting the first-ever images from within the anomaly. There was no rock, no sediment, no floor of an ancient valley. Instead, the probe floated in a cavernous darkness, a space of incomprehensible volume. Its low-light imagers revealed a surface above, the one it had just passed through, but it was not the rough, scalloped interface of a subglacial lake's ceiling. It was a ceiling of absolute, polished black, a seamless expanse that reflected the probe's own lights with perfect clarity, betraying no texture, no features, only an unnerving, geometric perfection. The initial atmospheric sensors returned data that was, at first, dismissed as instrumental error. The pressure was stable, just over 1 standard atmosphere, and the temperature a constant, almost comfortable 2 degrees Celsius. The composition was a mixture of nitrogen and argon, with trace amounts of noble gases, but critically, almost no free oxygen and no carbon dioxide. It was a sterile, ancient air, an atmosphere that had been sealed and preserved for a span of time that dwarfed human civilization. The probe had not simply drilled into a cave, it had breached a hermetically sealed container, an artifact whose interior environment was as deliberately constructed as its external form. The scale of the space was the next impossibility to be confronted. Laser rangefinders, pulsing invisible beams into the void, failed to find a floor or walls within their 10-kilometer operational limit. The gravimetric anomaly had not been a solid block, it had been the signature of a colossal, hollow structure, a shell of hyperdense material surrounding a vast, engineered biosphere. Within this manufactured void, this chamber of impossible scale buried under the Antarctic ice, the probe began its slow, methodical exploration, a solitary mode of 21st-century technology navigating a space forged by an intelligence from a forgotten geological era. The ambient conditions remained unnervingly constant, a pressure of 11 atmospheres, a temperature locked at a stable 22 degrees Celsius, and an atmospheric composition that suggested a deliberate and sustained chemical equilibrium. The most perplexing environmental factor was a faint, pervasive luminescence, a soft, directionless glow that emanated not from a single source but from the very fabric of the space itself, providing just enough light for the probe's sensitive optical arrays to perceive the vastness it occupied. This was not thermal radiation, nor was it any known form of electroluminescence, it was a gentle, uniform radiance that seemed to be a fundamental property of the cavern's interior, a field of soft energy that filled the volume like a phantom mist. The probe's trajectory was carefully plotted, a spiraling descent towards the center of the structure, the point of maximum gravitational intensity. As it moved, its long-range scanners began to build a three-dimensional model of the interior. The chamber was a near-perfect ellipsoid, a shape chosen, perhaps, for its inherent structural strength, its ability to distribute the colossal weight of the overlying ice sheet. The walls, when they finally came into range, were as smooth and featureless as the ceiling, a continuous curve of the same polished, black material that reflected no radar signals and absorbed all frequencies of active scanning with an unnerving totality. The material itself was a source of profound mystery. Laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, performed by focusing a high-energy beam onto the surface from a safe distance, returned a spectrum that contained familiar elements, carbon, silicon, iron, but in a crystalline lattice structure that was theoretically unstable under any known laws of chemistry and physics. It was a form of matter that had been engineered at the atomic level, its bonds forced into a configuration that granted it a tensile strength and density orders of magnitude beyond any material created by human science. This was not a building material, it was a fundamental re-engineering of matter itself, a substance designed to endure the pressures of a planetary crust and the slow, grinding passage of geological ages. As the probe continued its journey, its most sensitive biological sensors, designed to detect single-celled organisms or even stray organic molecules, began to register faint but persistent signals. The air was not entirely sterile. Suspended within the ancient, oxygen-poor atmosphere were complex, long-chain polymers, molecules with a structure reminiscent of proteins and nucleic acids, but built from a different set of foundational components. They were the chemical ghosts of a biosphere, the fragmented, degraded remnants of a biological system that had long since ceased to function. There were no living cells, no active metabolism, only this molecular dust, a fine, invisible aerosol of what had once been life, circulating endlessly in the faint atmospheric currents of the sealed chamber. The space was a tomb, but not an empty one. It was a meticulously crafted mausoleum, designed not just to house the dead, but to preserve the very chemical essence of their existence, protecting their most fundamental biological information from the ravages of time and the crushing, frozen oblivion of the world outside. The silence was not one of emptiness, but of reverence, the stillness of a sanctuary built to outlast the stars. Navigating through the faint, uniform glow of the vast, ellipsoidal chamber, the probe maintained its deliberate course toward the gravitational focus, the point deep within the structure from which the anomalous density readings originated. The journey itself was a passage through a volume so immense that the human mind struggled to contextualize it. The probe, a sophisticated instrument of exploration, was reduced to the scale of a single dust mote floating within a great cathedral. For days it traveled, its thrusters firing in precise bursts, pushing it through the thin, ancient atmosphere. The molecular traces of a forgotten biology remained a constant, a ghostly signature in the air, but the space itself was devoid of any other feature. There were no smaller structures, no partitions, no signs of habitation in the human sense. The entire cavern appeared to be a single, monolithic volume, dedicated to a singular, central purpose. And then, slowly, a form began to resolve out of the deep gloom ahead, coalescing from the directionless light. It was the source of the gravitational anomaly, the heart of the entire construct, a spire. It rose from the unseen floor of the chamber, a colossal pillar of a crystalline, faintly luminous material, its peak vanishing into the upper reaches of the ellipsoid, so tall that its full extent could not be captured in a single view. Unlike the matte black, light-absorbing material of the outer shell, this central structure seemed to be composed of a substance that interacted with the ambient energy field, drawing it in and re-emitting it as a soft, internal luminescence. The spire was not a simple geometric shape. Its form was complex, tapering and flaring in a series of graceful, mathematically precise curves, its overall structure reminiscent of a highly stylized, organic growth, like the crystalline model of a cosmic tree. It was a thing of profound and alien beauty, a piece of sculpture on a scale that dwarfed mountains. As the probe drew closer, its sensors began to analyze the spire's composition and energetic output. Spectrographic analysis revealed a metallic crystal, a lattice of elements arranged with atomic precision, but the isotopic ratios were unlike anything found in the solar system. The material was ancient, forged in the heart of a star that had died long before the sun had formed, its heavy elements indicating a stellar genesis of a different order. It was primordial matter, gathered and shaped by a technology that could manipulate the very building blocks of the universe. The structure was also the source of the entire system's energy. It hummed, not with an audible sound, but with a deep, ultra-low frequency vibration that resonated through the probe's chassis. This was not waste heat from a power source, the spire was at the same ambient temperature as the rest of the chamber. The energy was a direct, contained resonance, a standing wave of immense power held in a stable, perpetual state within the spire's crystalline matrix. This resonance was the engine of the entire artifice. It was this vibration, propagated through the foundation of the structure, that actively countered the immense pressure of the overlying ice, preventing the chamber from collapsing. It was this controlled release of energy that maintained the constant temperature and powered the faint, ambient light. It was a power source that did not consume fuel or generate waste, a form of captured, solid-state energy that drew upon the fundamental properties of spacetime itself, a testament to a mastery of physics that bordered on the magical. The probe began a slow, circular orbit of the spire, its cameras and sensors cataloging every detail of this impossible artifact, a monument built by unknown hands for an unknowable purpose, a silent, glowing heart pumping a subtle, timeless energy into the void of its own creation. The slow, methodical circumnavigation of the central spire revealed a new layer of complexity, a level of detail that shifted the understanding of the artifact from a monument of passive endurance to a device of active, intricate function. From a distance, the spire's surface had appeared smooth, its crystalline facets gleaming in the soft, internal light. But as the probe moved to within meters of the colossal structure, its high-resolution imagers resolved a surface that was anything but uniform. The entirety of the spire, from its unseen base to its vanishing peak, was covered in a dense, interlocking network of patterns, a tapestry of geometric forms etched into its luminous surface with microscopic precision. These were not mere decorations, not the aesthetic carvings of a sculptor. The patterns were composed of channels, grooves, and raised ridges, some no wider than a human hair, that branched and converged with the rigorous logic of a circuit diagram. They formed immense, repeating motifs that spiraled around the spire's circumference, each motif a self-contained system of fractal complexity. Zooming in on a single section revealed that the larger geometric shapes were themselves composed of smaller, identical shapes, and these in turn were made of even smaller iterations, a descent into infinitesimal detail that seemed to continue down to the resolving limit of the probe's instruments. The sheer density of information encoded in these patterns was astronomical. It was as if the entire surface of a mountain range had been inscribed with the contents of a continental library. The material of the spire itself seemed to facilitate this function. The channels were not empty, they appeared to contain the resonating energy that filled the chamber, channeling it in controlled, specific pathways. The light within the spire was not uniform, it was brighter within these grooves, flowing and pulsing in slow, rhythmic cycles, a visual representation of a vast, silent computation. The spire was not just a power source, it was a machine. A computer, a data storage device, a processing engine of unimaginable capacity and power, using light and resonance trapped in a crystalline matrix as its medium. The patterns were its architecture, its integrated circuits, its memory banks. This was not a technology of wires and silicon chips, but one of solid-state physics, where the computational substrate and the energy source were one and the same. The probe's sensors, analyzing the faint fields around these channels, detected subtle modulations in the resonant frequency, shifts and pulses that occurred in complex, non-repeating sequences. It was the whisper of a calculation still running, a program set in motion millions of years ago that had not yet terminated. The glyphs, as the science teams began to call them, represented a form of writing, but not one based on phonetic or symbolic representation of a spoken language. It seemed to be a direct, physical language of mathematics and physics, where the geometry of the symbols and the flow of energy through them were the message itself. A single, complex glyph did not stand for a concept, it was the concept, a working model of a mathematical theorem or a physical law, executing itself in a slow, perpetual loop. The civilization that built this had transcended abstract representation and had learned to encode knowledge into the fundamental structure of matter and energy, creating an archive that was not just a record of their understanding, but a living embodiment of it. The probe, drifting silently alongside this library of light, could only record the surface of this profound text, a silent observer before a mountain of alien scripture, its own advanced systems dwarfed by the sheer elegance and scale of the silent, thinking crystal beside it. The analysis of the spire's deep, pervasive hum became the central focus of a global network of physicists and data scientists, a puzzle that promised to unlock the fundamental principles of the builder's technology. The raw data, streamed from the probe's sensors, described a phenomenon that had no direct terrestrial analog. It was a form of mechanical resonance, a vibration of the spire's atomic lattice, yet it produced no discernible heat, the ultimate signature of inefficiency in any energetic system known to humanity. The energy was perfectly contained, a closed loop operating in a state of near-total coherence. As theoretical models were developed, a startling picture began to emerge. The builders had mastered a domain of physics that remained purely speculative for human science, the direct manipulation of spacetime at a quantum level. The spire was not generating energy in a conventional sense, it was acting as a colossal tuning fork, resonating at a specific frequency that interacted with the zero-point energy of the vacuum itself. It was drawing a trickle of power from the seething quantum foam that underlies all of reality, a virtually limitless source of energy that is present in every cubic centimeter of empty space. This process, known in theoretical physics as the dynamical Casimir effect, was the key. The precise, fractal geometry of the glyphs covering the spire was not just for information storage, it was the mechanism. The channels and ridges acted as a vast array of resonating cavities, each tuned to an exact harmonic. The complex interplay of these trillions upon trillions of oscillators, all vibrating in perfect synchrony, created a stable, macroscopic quantum state. This coherent state allowed the spire to create a subtle but powerful pressure gradient in the quantum vacuum, effectively pushing against the fabric of spacetime. This negative pressure was what counteracted the physical weight of the 3 kilometers of ice above, supporting the roof of the chamber not through brute force, but through a gentle, persistent, and perfectly distributed manipulation of fundamental forces. It was an act of engineering so advanced it appeared as a form of physical law unto itself. The faint, ambient light within the chamber was a secondary byproduct of this process. As virtual particles from the quantum foam were harvested for their energy, a small, predictable percentage of them decayed into real photons, a phenomenon known as Unruh radiation. The light was the exhaust, the faint whisper of the engine's operation, and its uniformity was a testament to the perfect distribution of the effect across the entire volume of the chamber. The stable temperature was also a function of this system. The resonance actively managed the thermal state of the interior, not by heating or cooling, but by controlling the kinetic energy of the atoms in the atmosphere, damping their vibrations to maintain a state of perfect thermal equilibrium. The entire subglacial environment was, in effect, a single, massive, solid-state machine, a self-sustaining ecosystem powered by the latent energy of the void. The builders had not simply constructed a shelter, they had hollowed out a piece of reality and redefined its internal physics to suit their needs. They had created a bubble of engineered existence, a pocket universe designed to be eternally stable, powered by the cosmos itself, and protected from the ravages of the outside world by a shield of ice and a mastery of the laws of nature that human science was only just beginning to comprehend. The spire was more than a monument, it was a demonstration of a technological apotheosis, a final, perfect machine built to run forever in the silent dark. The task of deciphering the information encoded on the spire's surface was a challenge of unprecedented scale, requiring the development of new fields of mathematics and computational analysis. The patterns were not a language to be translated, but a system to be understood, a direct, physical representation of knowledge. The breakthrough came not from linguists, but from cosmologists and mathematicians who recognized recurring geometric motifs that corresponded to fundamental physical constants, the precise curvature of a channel that mirrored the fine structure constant, the branching angle of a fractal pattern that precisely encoded the value of pi, the frequency of light pulses in a specific circuit that matched the 21-centimeter emission line of neutral hydrogen. The builders had used the universal language of the cosmos itself as their primer. With this key, the slow, painstaking work of interpretation began. Teams of scientists began to map the vast logical structures flowing across the spire, recognizing them as complex astronomical models, stellar charts, and galactic maps of breathtaking detail and accuracy. The spire was an almanac, an encyclopedia of the heavens. The data it contained was not contemporary. Stellar positions were subtly different, the proper motions of nearby stars extrapolated backward revealing a chart of the sky not as it is now, but as it was approximately 34 million years ago, during the Eocene-Oligocene transition, the very period when the Antarctic ice sheet began its inexorable formation. The archive was a snapshot of a specific, ancient moment in time. Within these star charts were models of the solar system, rendered with a precision that allowed for the tracking of individual asteroids and comets. And here, a profound revelation lay hidden. The model of the early solar system was different from the one known to modern astronomy. It showed a fifth terrestrial planet, a super-Earth orbiting between Mars and Jupiter, a world with oceans, a dense atmosphere, and a large moon. The asteroid belt was conspicuously absent, represented only by a sparse scattering of minor bodies. The spire's archives depicted a solar system that no longer exists. Cross-referencing this planetary model with other data streams from the spire, which appeared to be geological and biological records, a history began to form. This lost world, which the science teams provisionally named Pente, was the home of the builders. The glyphs contained its entire natural history, the evolution of its continents, the chemistry of its oceans, the genetic makeup of its biosphere, all encoded in the silent, flowing light of the crystal. This was the world they had lost, the home they had been forced to abandon. The spire was not just an encyclopedia of abstract knowledge, it was a memorial, a detailed and loving portrait of a world that had been destroyed. The implications were staggering. The prevailing theory of the asteroid belt's formation, that it was the remnant of a planet that failed to form due to Jupiter's gravitational influence, was incorrect. It was the remnant of a planet that had been shattered. The spire did not explicitly state the cause of this destruction, but other sections of the archive, detailing deep space phenomena, provided chilling clues. The knowledge contained within the crystal was not merely academic, it was a legacy, a warning, and a lament, a message in a bottle cast into the sea of time, waiting in the cold and the dark beneath a continent of ice for a successor intelligence to find it and understand. The molecular fragments suspended in the chamber's ancient atmosphere, meticulously collected and analyzed by the probe, offered the only direct biological evidence of the spire's builders. While no intact cells or large-scale biological structures remained, the complex polymers represented a form of genetic archive, a degraded but still legible blueprint of their fundamental biology. The information-carrying molecule was not DNA, but a far more complex, stable structure, a double helix woven from 6 base pairs instead of 4, utilizing a sugar-phosphate backbone that incorporated silicon atoms, granting it an extraordinary resistance to thermal and radiation damage. This was a biochemistry that was at once alien and yet hauntingly familiar, an independent evolutionary path that had arrived at similar solutions for the storage and transmission of hereditary information. Reconstructing a hypothetical biology from this fragmented genetic code was a monumental task of computational biology. Supercomputers worked for months, piecing together gene analogs, regulatory networks, and protein-equivalent structures. The picture that emerged was of a life form that had evolved on a planet with higher gravity and a denser, oxygen-richer atmosphere than Earth's. They were likely carbon-based, but with a significant silicon component integrated into their skeletal and nervous systems, providing structural rigidity and enhanced electrochemical processing. Their cellular metabolism was theorized to be far more efficient than that of terrestrial life, a necessity for supporting a complex organism in a high-gravity environment. The model suggested a bipedal, radially symmetric body plan, with multiple limbs capable of fine manipulation and a complex sensory apparatus that likely perceived a broader spectrum of electromagnetic radiation than human vision allows. They were not giants, but dense, powerfully built beings, their biology a testament to the harsh physical conditions of their homeworld, the lost planet Pente. The archives on the spire provided the environmental context for this biology. The encoded geological and atmospheric data painted a vivid picture of a world of deep, warm oceans, vast continents covered in flora that utilized a different photosynthetic pathway, and a sky dominated by the looming presence of a large moon. It was a world teeming with a complex and diverse biosphere, of which the builders were the final, intelligent product. Their civilization, according to the historical records encoded in the spire's light, had existed for millions of years, a continuous, stable society that had achieved a deep and symbiotic integration with its planet's ecosystem. Their technology, even in its early stages, was not one of crude extraction and combustion, but of biological integration and sustainable energy cycles. They had learned to manage their world's climate, to harness geothermal and tidal forces, and to build with living, self-repairing materials. The spire was the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a machine that was not separate from the laws of nature, but a direct application of them, a construct that drew its power from the fabric of reality itself and was designed to endure on a geological timescale. The tragedy was that their mastery over their own world could not protect them from the indifference of the cosmos. The evidence of their existence, preserved only in molecular dust and photons trapped in crystal, told a story of a profound and ancient intelligence, a people who had achieved a level of wisdom and technological prowess that humanity could only dream of, only to be erased by a catastrophe that they could foresee but were powerless to prevent. The chamber beneath the ice was not just their archive, it was the last remnant of a lost branch of life, a final, silent echo of a voice that had once filled a world. The narrative of the builder's end was not recorded in a single, dramatic inscription, but was woven throughout the vast astronomical archives of the spire, a slow and terrible revelation pieced together from disparate data sets. It was a story of a cataclysm that unfolded not over days or years, but over millennia, a cosmic tide that rose slowly and inexorably to wash their world away. The primary evidence came from the spire's detailed models of galactic dynamics, which included the trajectory and life cycle of a massive, rogue star that had passed through the outer regions of their solar system approximately 35 million years ago. This was not a direct collision, but a gravitational encounter of profound consequence. The star's immense gravity perturbed the orbits of the outer gas giants, subtly shifting their positions and destabilizing the delicate gravitational balance of the entire system. This disturbance initiated a chain reaction. The orbit of their home planet, Pente, was slowly, almost imperceptibly, altered. The spire's records show a meticulous, multi-generational effort to track these changes, their astronomers watching with growing horror as their world was pushed into a new, unstable orbital path. The consequences were catastrophic, but they unfolded with geological slowness. The planet's climate began to change radically. Ice ages of unprecedented severity gripped the poles, while the equatorial regions were racked by hyperhurricanes and continental droughts. The builders, with their advanced technology, fought to stabilize their world. The archives contain records of continent-scale geoengineering projects, atmospheric processors to regulate greenhouse gases, orbital mirrors to manage solar insolation, and seismic dampers to control tectonic activity. For thousands of years, they succeeded, holding their dying world together through sheer force of will and intellect. But the ultimate threat was one they could not engineer away. The gravitational perturbations had also destabilized a vast cloud of cometary bodies in the system's outer reaches, sending a slow, steady stream of them careening into the inner solar system. The spire's chronicles become a long, grim ledger of impacts, first small, then larger, each one a devastating blow to their already fragile biosphere. They built planetary defense systems, networks of energy projectors that could vaporize incoming threats, but they could not stop them all. The final entries in this section of the archive are a mathematical projection, a cold, precise calculation of an inevitable, final collision with a planet-killer-class object, an impact that would not just cause an extinction event, but would physically shatter their world. Faced with this certainty, they made a choice. They could not save their people, scattered across a dying planet. A mass evacuation was impossible, there was nowhere to go. So they chose to save their knowledge. They initiated their final project, the construction of the archive, the spire, the chamber. They chose Earth as the location, a geologically stable, neighboring world with a nascent, primitive biosphere that might one day evolve its own intelligent life. They transported the materials, primordial matter from the system's formation, and began construction in the continent that would become Antarctica, at that time a temperate land of forests and rivers. The structure was not a city or a shelter for their population. It was a time capsule, a message, a final act of a civilization that, in the face of its own annihilation, chose to preserve its memory and its wisdom, bequeathing it to the future. They designed it to survive the coming ice age on Earth, to endure the grinding of glaciers and the passage of eons, a silent, patient machine waiting in the dark, powered by the universe itself, holding the complete memory of a world that was now just a belt of dust and rock between Mars and Jupiter. The mission of the solitary probe eventually reached its conclusion. Its power reserves were finite, and its purpose, to survey, to measure, to record, had been fulfilled. After a final, comprehensive scan of the central spire, its thrusters were fired one last time to push it into a stable, distant orbit within the chamber, where it would remain, a silent, 21st-century satellite to an ancient, alien star. Its systems powered down, and the fragile fiber optic link to the world above went dark. But the knowledge it had gathered had already reshaped humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. The discovery was not one of conquest or contact, but of inheritance. Humanity was not the first intelligent species in the solar system, it was the second, and its existence was a cosmic accident, a consequence of the same cataclysm that had destroyed its predecessor. The water in Earth's oceans, the very stuff of life, was now understood to have been significantly augmented by the cometary bombardment that had destroyed Pente, a final, ironic gift from a dying world. The silence from the chamber beneath the ice was now understood not as an emptiness, but as a presence. The spire continued its slow, silent computation. The resonance that held the chamber open against the weight of the ice was not eternal, but it was extraordinarily long-lived. The models derived from the probe's data indicated that the energy source was slowly, almost imperceptibly, decaying, a process with a half-life measured in hundreds of thousands of years. The light would fade, the temperature would drop, and eventually, in a future so distant it was almost meaningless, the resonance would fail, and the ice would finally claim the chamber, crushing the spire and its silent library into dust. But for now, it remained, a monument to foresight and intelligence, a testament to a people who saw their end coming and chose to speak to the future. The Antarctic ice sheet, once seen as a desolate wasteland, was now imbued with a profound and sacred significance. It was a shroud, but also a cradle, a protective blanket that had guarded this incredible secret for millions of years. The flow of its glaciers, the accumulation of its snow, the deep, cold stillness of its interior were all part of the preservation engine that had allowed the builder's message to survive. The world above continued its frantic, noisy existence, but beneath the southern pole, a deeper, older story persisted. It was a story of a great civilization, of a lost world, of a cosmic catastrophe, and of a final, magnificent act of intellectual defiance. The discovery of the chamber did not provide answers to the ultimate questions of meaning or purpose, but it offered a new, humbling perspective. It suggested a universe that was at once terrifyingly destructive and yet filled with the potential for staggering beauty and intelligence. And it left humanity with a profound choice, to be merely the inheritors of a cosmic tragedy, or to become the students of its victims, to learn from the silent wisdom encoded in the heart of the crystal, and to carry the memory of that lost world forward into the future, a second chance for intelligence in a lonely solar system. The echo in the ice was a call to remembrance, a reminder that survival is not guaranteed, and that the ultimate measure of a civilization is what it chooses to leave behind.